Today, Koen from Personio joins me to separate the BS from the real when it comes to AI in go-to-market. We'll cover real use cases and explore why AI truly adds value in those situations. In other news, attive.ai is coming out of beta today. We're connecting all your go-to-market data into one intelligent workspace to help lift everyone's performance on your team. Take a look if you want to. And now, enjoy the show.
Everyone wants to have this shiny feature whatsoever, but we need to understand what is the real problem and what is the fundament under that problem and how can we solve that problem? How can potentially AI help? Everything comes down by, is it trained well on the right data set? That's not only for AI, that's also for you and me as an SDR. You need to continuously feed it with what good looks like, like those kind of coaching, AI assistants, etc. They can help as long as they prompt proactively every day pop up like, hey, Toni, I listened to your call last night. Like, do you want to get feedback on this point? As long as if it gets back to you proactively, I'm a big fan.
So I have Koen back here on the show. And today we wanted to talk about, well, I feel like there's lots of anxiety out there about using AI in go-to-market. And I also feel more and more people are, I want to say, either calling BS on it or don't trust that there is something or whatever they might think. And today I wanted to have the chat with Koen on, you know, what him and I both see there out there in the market that works or doesn't work. And I think, and this is the tee up here, I think what's quite interesting, Koen, you can kind of say that yourself, but obviously you are a senior sales leader at Personio, so you are living some of that reality yourself every day. But also you do promote the GTMOS, right? Kind of maybe, you know, talk about that in a second yourself a little bit. But there is a little bit of like, hey, there's some cool AI shit going on. And let's promote that, right? And same in my own situation. You know, I'm building a company that is around AI and go to market, and people promote and sell things. But I'm also advising founders and kind of, you know, not directly, but to a large degree, need to live through my decisions there a little bit more, right? I think the idea of the session here today is a little bit like, what's the difference between the dream that you and I sometimes are part of selling and what we're actually living in reality? Because I think that juxtaposition can help some people to sift through what is the Koen Toni sales job, and what is maybe reality, right? And I think that could be really fun for people to listen to. But Koen, before I go further in kind of all of that stuff, tell us maybe just a little bit more about GTMOS and what you're building there.
Yeah, maybe first, before we jump into GTMOS, I think we fundamentally need to make AI not that complex and not just so overhyped, right? And this is also, I mean, I will introduce GTMOS, but like, it's just nothing else than like, what is the problem? Do we really deeply understand the problem, and where are we trying to solve for? And make it very simplistic. And I think that's like where everything goes wrong when it comes to the hype. Everyone wants to have this shiny feature whatsoever, but we need to understand what is the real problem and what is the fundament under that problem, and how can we solve that problem? How can potentially AI help? And I think that's where it goes wrong. And just as a bridge to our GTMOS, it's nothing fancy. I mean, for 3 years, I mean, as you know, I like to educate myself. I need to educate myself as a leader because I have all different kind of cross-functional teams, whether it is SDRs, AEs, account managers, customer success at Personio. I'm mostly as well like chapter lead in Pavilion, and I found it very important to share among my learnings with my peers and vice versa. And therefore, I educate myself on LinkedIn because I'm active on LinkedIn, but I read and learn and engage a lot. I do the same thing on podcasts. I do the same thing on newsletters. Yes, I also do this stuff. But of course, there are way better experts and more experience or different looks at go-to-market, which I want to collect. I want to make sure I collect those insights. And for years, I was struggling, how can I make this relevant? How can I make this impactful and contextualized towards you, Toni, and myself, Koen, who are both different go-to-market leaders. And therefore, AI came into the mix, and I just store all this kind of stuff in databases and actually let AI put it into micro-learnings. And whether this is generative or eventually agentic AI, you can build any kind of really fancy workflows to leverage that information for your specific problem. And that's actually what I'm trying to do with Go-to-Market OS. It's still quite complex, but if I want to translate this into, I want to help you as a go-to-market leader, or I want to help you as an AE or an SDR or an account manager, what is your best next step when it comes to go-to-market? And that's what I want to do with all those learnings and AI in your context. But we will get towards that in a bit. But yeah.
So, and I think the task here for today is we're gonna go through. I think disciples will say the bow tie, but just the go-to-market process from start to finish, and see where there are problems where I can help. Because I actually think the issue is still a little bit, it's very easy to find problems in the funnel. I think that's super easy. I think what's really difficult though is, learning and understanding where AI can help and how. That's still so ambiguous, and it's, in the beginning it was, well, everywhere AI is going to replace everyone and everything, and we're now learning more and more that that's actually not really the case, right? Let's maybe call out BS, like things that I said a year ago, even 6 months ago. I will say, like, you know what, actually we tried this out, doesn't work. And let's kind of go through the list. I would propose, Koen, we start at the very top of the funnel, on the very left side of the funnel, which is kind of the marketing area. I can go first. You can go first. How do you want to, what do you want to do?
Go ahead. Like, Elite, let's look at the entire customer journey. Well, we both are lovers of the bow tie, but because that's the thing, there are so many elements, and everyone maybe thinks really narrow on this AI SDR thing, or the vibe coding with Lovable, but let's really break that down into the funnel, because there's so much more to explore.
And actually, kind of a good point. I think there are a couple of other areas in the business where I has found a really strong fit, right? So you just mentioned Lovable and vibe coding, and generally speaking, coding, right? I'm coding now using Cursor. Like, isn't that insane? It's completely insane.
But I still wonder here, and that's also a thing. And again, we need, when we talk about BS, we need to call this out. If you want to get really good results with AI, it is a tremendous investment of time. And the question should be, should you and me, in our core job, who we are and what we need to accomplish, do we need to do this? And that's like a thing. Like, everyone wants to be this coder nowadays. I mean, for 2.5 years, I pay an AI engineer on the side to get that done, so I can focus on the go-to-market matter. I think that's also, we need to be honest towards each other. Like,
no, it's 100%, but also my position is a little bit different, right? Kind of entrepreneur, founder, small team. Like, I'm picking up little jobs here and there. It's not that I'm building the product, like, God forbid, right? I'm kind of doing some website stuff, and that's kind of easy, actually. But just saying, kind of, I think on the coding side, AI has definitely found, let's just call it product market fit, and more than that, right? Kind of things have been blowing up there. I think another example that seems really good, and we can go into this, touching go-to-market a little bit more, is the support side of things, so especially in B2C, right? A lot of chatbots and so forth have become a lot better with AI. And then I think the third thing that I'm seeing works apparently extremely well is the whole legal space. So there are a couple of legal AI companies now that basically are more or less, replacing a lot of the work tasks that come in the legal
100%.
profession.
And I think what is important here is asking ourselves, why is that the case? Before we go into market, but why is that the case? Why is a support use case or a legal use case? Why do we think that is an impactful use case which works?
I think the answer is there's a wealth of written and documented text information that the AI was able to learn from. And in the case of coding, it was even trained on that stuff, right? So when you think about it, you get an AI chatbot and then you teach it your chat history. Like, that's one thing, and now has that in, I don't know, like a rack, a context space. It has that in their memory, right? And can access that. But with coding, the reason why it's kind of 10x better with some of those things is because the AI was actually trained, on that data set. Before, it was locked up, and now it's done, now it's released, and now it can memorize your stuff. And I think that's really important for people to understand that the training bit and the memory bit, they're different, they're separated. And while it can probably deal really well with your text-based stuff, it doesn't mean it's super optimized for that, actually, right? But I think that is the reason, right? And when we say coding is text-based, well, You know, there was a website called Stack Overflow that basically completely imploded, where developers were sharing their code on like specific snippets. And this is one of the sources that AI was basically able to train on and understand, like, you know, how does the coding thing actually, and code is nothing else in a language, basically.
And I think that's like an important matter to take along. We start on the left side of the bow tie of the customer journey. It's about the rich context, content and context. I think that's really, really important. And there are more important elements, but this is like one fundamental where it goes also wrong in so many use cases, because the context is no quality data. And that's a really big one, but especially at the start of the funnel, where sometimes not all the data is really well stored in the CRM to be used.
Let's talk marketing real quick. I don't think you and I are the super experts on this. So I think there were some companies in the beginning that were really good at, you know, writing copy. Now ChatGPT does that also, and Claude does that extremely well too. That was kind of useful in the start. I think all of us are starting to get better and better and better at like, oh, this doesn't seem genuine content. This seems a little bit AI sloppy, versus kind of what's the real stuff, right? We're kind of learning that it's really good at, I wouldn't say polishing and rephrasing and structuring thoughts, but it's not so great at coming up with genuinely good thoughts, actually, right?
And again, here, because it doesn't know the right context, and let's be also honest, and that's like the entire thing for all of us users or founders or revenue leaders, is like the question we are asking is super generic. And I think I always trying to compare this with like us being an SDR, an AE, or an account manager or leader. It's like the more specific question we ask in our context towards your context, that really matters. So the more precise and specific and descriptive we are there, of course, your output will be way better. And then again, the context database on the other end, and that's also still where it goes really wrong.
Let's just say what works well with AI, and that's kind of almost not super correct in terms of like, that's a good AI application. But for sure, we are seeing that sources like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini are starting to be big channels for websites. We saw this previously in terms of e-commerce. We've seen this more and more in terms of B2B. There's really strong advice out there now how you can start ranking in this whole AI SEO space. There's a craze of investments going into, I think, 10 or 15 different players that want to be the new SEMrush and help you to figure out, you know, how you can rank higher and tracking all of that stuff. So there certainly seems to be something that's working and that people need to start probably investing in. It's like, how can we make sure, you know, when someone is asking a relevant question on ChatGPT, that we are somewhere in this word cloud that the LLM finds and then kind of, you know, presents to the
And again,
user.
I find it also important for all of us, because sometimes we need to stand still because AI goes so fast. But if you as a founder or revenue leader have any kind of question in your private life, I can bet you most likely, I mean, at least I do, any of my questions I go to ChatGPT or Claude and not towards Google. If buyers are doing the same and they do the same, however, they upload their entire list of requirements or what have you. Again, the context, which is so important. So rather make sure that indeed your context on your website is really picked up by those new browsers, because they are the new browsers. And again, there's like a very underestimated element if you don't, with your content team and with your marketing team, really write for eventually AI browsers to pick it up.
That's another thing, by the way, and I think that will probably continue. People are putting text and information on the website that isn't actually being displayed. And it's just there in the code for the AI to read it. Because they know, like, if you put anything on your website, it should be short, it should be bulleted, it should be like super understandable and everything, right? Because we humans, we just lack the attention span. Well, for the AI, the same problem doesn't apply. The richer the information, the more, you know, the more stuff you can add into it, the better it will be able to tailor a specific request from someone on ChatGPT to what they're actually asking for. Because to your point, right, it's like, hey, give me an HRIS that works in, you know, Holland, is best for the, you know, the SMB market or Mittelstand, you know, has these and these features, can do this and this stuff. And then, you know, you want to have ChatGPT be able to serve as Personio, basically. I'm not sure if I'm, you know, paraphrasing it correctly. But that's kind of the idea, right? Other things in marketing, Koen, what do you see anything where AI is super helpful?
I think eventually, and let's be honest, if we are looking, we have on our website or in our CRM, what is this, in HubSpot or Salesforce? I know we should not name name brands, but like these are, I think, 9 of 10 times used in by startups and scale-ups, etc. But like there's so much data, or maybe let's put it really directly, like poor data into those systems, and a lot of information which we are actually missing, which is out there online. There's so much information out there because it can scrape even LinkedIn profiles. Actually, it can go over the entire web. So one of the key things where we also look into is, let's call it a research agent, right? Like all those intent signals. And how I'm just sometimes imagine, and that's also part of like one of those use cases which I'm just doing myself now, GTMOS. I'm just advising some founders and some sales teams there, is like, if we have the context of the CRM, ideally we go out on the web and we pick up any of those signals. And again, those prompts need to be very specific, and we can pick information. Semi, Clay, or all those other tools, who are they're actually doing the same thing, and we can enrich our CRM, or we can enrich the preparation for the next call, etc. I think these use cases are highly underestimated, and especially if you triple down eventually later on from like top funnel to middle funnel, when you really start as a human within a startup or scale-up talking to a prospect, but that can be, of course, the agent, can be AI, it can be the human. If we have those data insights, which are not that difficult to collect, but you want the AI to run this 24/7. So when I'm Monday morning, I have those insights, which I can take from my CRM, which is my still single source of database truth. That doesn't have any other function name, but it preps me really well before I move into my next meeting. And I can do, and I always call this here, like, and that's also what we need to really think of. Like, it won't replace an AE or persons, but it can really help you becoming this 1, 5, or 10% better. And that compounds over time if you leverage those data insights. And that's like also how I look at AI. It's like, no, it's not like, oh, it has all those signals, so it can run my outbound campaign, and there we have the AI SDR. No, it helps.
I think you mentioned a couple of really, really strong points here. And I'm just going to try and kind of pull them, apart a little bit. Let's just linger a second on the AI SDR thing. I think this blew up a lot in first positive and then a very negative way over the last 12 to 18 months. There certainly is a category of software that's been created. Like, certainly there's something here. Some people have success with this. And if you think about what worked well, what didn't work well, I think what is working well are all the tasks that are much easier for AI to do than for humans, which is basically reading a bunch of text, aka research, whether that text is on a website, on a news site, or in your CRM, on a call, doesn't fully actually matter. It's not like every SDR is sitting down and listening to the past opportunities that they had and kind of the calls and reading through the emails. It's just not going to happen, right? You don't
There's also no time for it, right? So
that's what I'm saying. AI is really good at that stuff. Like, give me a bunch of text, I'm going to summarize it in the best perfect way for you. Like, really, so the research piece, I think that's certainly something. And then, people were thinking about, hey, it can write emails really quickly and really well. I think that is less so proven at this point that was a great idea. I'm not sure if you guys at Personio are kind of using something like this, but
yeah, I mean,
the writing part is kind of a bit iffy, isn't it?
It comes in, and I don't have all the answers here, right? Like, it's only from the experience which you learn yourself and the teams, etc. But like, I think again, it comes back towards this context. If you really have the right information, and I have direct access towards my call recordings and all the transcripts, and I know all this information, and I think if I had that information on itself, a follow-up email can be done quite okay. A initial first outbound email, I think, let's be honest, because that's also what we need to be aware and call out, right? Like, everything comes down by, is it trained well on the right data set? That's not only for AI, that's also for you and me as an SDR. Like, let's be honest, most of those onboardings are not perfect. And onboarding is done and we think we are done. No, it's a continuous iteration. I think Jason Lemkin is one of those examples. I really like how proactive he shares like what he's building with SaaS AI. And he is continuously training his outbound agent. And I think that's the thing. You need to continuously feed it with what good looks like, And that's like, and there comes again, like the time investment. We as humans, we think like, hey, AI, let's put all the information in and let's put it out and oh, it's fine. No, I can get you, like I write on every Monday morning my newsletter. Every Sunday night, actually last night towards 11, I wanted to go to bed. But like, no, I don't like this. I need to iterate, need to iterate. No, it still doesn't sound like me. And still, because I also use AI there. And I think that's the thing. If you give it the right context and you really have the patience to train what good looks like, always steal that thing to sort of quote from Kevin Dorsey, but like, that is really what makes the difference. And if you do that continuously, consistently, I don't see why AI SDR can't work. But not only AI, it's human in the loop.
You know, what's also really important to remember, we talked about why is AI good at certain tasks, right? I think what's actually really key to just keep in mind is none of us are actually training AI. Let's just kind of be clear on that. Like, no one is actually training the AI itself from our side, right? Kind of the training has finished when it's released. You can ask the AI kind of when was your training done, and they will give you November 23rd, 2024 or something like this, right? What we're doing is we're managing context, right? And what we're kind of sometimes then doing in order to achieve that is we are adjusting the prompt a little bit and we're adding something, we're taking something away. I was listening, and I'm not by no means an expert on this, but I was listening to a podcast that apparently is very much a deep expert on this. And they were talking about, it's a little bit like asking a student to come into the room and play the saxophone. And then, oh, you didn't quite hit it. Let me give you a new set of instruction. But instead of this being the same student, you hold in a new student, like a clone of that person, basically. Give an updated, set of instructions, and then they have them play the saxophone. And they're basically saying like, I think this is really difficult to achieve. And this is, I think, where humans, because we have this ongoing training, kind of still works out. I want to move us ahead a little bit though, Koen. So one other thing that I've seen that works extremely well, and still talking SDRs here, is mock cold calls. So you are basically, as a human, during onboarding or training or ongoing training, you are calling an AI, and you have like an interaction with it, and then you will be rated on this afterwards. And similarly so, after every cold call, every connect, everything that you could actually record, you get some feedback from an AI kind of into your Slack or wherever on like how well you did, right? I think some of those immediate like feedback things, I think extremely powerful, honestly, really powerful. Your manager couldn't listen to all of that. Forget about it. It's not going to happen, right? And like, I think that piece is really cool.
No, it is. The only thing I want to call out, and just to be open and honest, because like this is like how I look at it, is like where I see the biggest challenge and struggle with AI is it's always the human proactively from themselves need to go towards the AI to ask all those questions. And I think in order, because eventually AI is a hype, like with a lot of fancy tools, like this is fancy, I also want this. And then there is this hype at the start, and then you see adoption fading away. And why that happens is it is this threshold of getting daily back into that matter, which makes it really difficult. And I think that's like where any vendor on AI and we as leaders need to think of, if we want eventually our people to really leverage on a daily basis. It sounds weird. And I think like to your point, like those kind of coaching AI assistants, etc., they can help as long as they prompt proactively every day pop up like, hey, Toni, I listened to your call last night. Like, do you want to get feedback on this point or because otherwise the danger I see is that this AE, SDR, or whoever wants to be trained is not proactively going back towards that tool. So as long as if it gets back to you proactively, I'm a big fan. And then the second thing is still where I see, because I asked it a lot when we also had community events, is like to leaders, it's like, hey, who is talking to their AI? Are you talking to your AI on Toni? Like texting or talking?
I'm texting. I'm a texter.
Well, why are you a texter? What is faster? How can you give more context to AI?
I don't know. I'm a millennial. Also, I don't take phone calls. I text with people. You know, that's the same relationship I have with the AI.
We have
But I know where you're going.
We have the same age. I'm all
I know. Thing is, I tried it out, and I don't know. Maybe I selected the wrong voice or something like this. But it just sounded like this. I didn't want to talk to that person, basically.
But like,
that's what I decided.
No, it is. You can change voices. I would not recommend uploading my voice, but like I can imagine, like you can also eventually maybe pick the voice you like, which sounds like, hey, I really want to get coached by Toni, and I just upload Toni's voice and then continue to have Toni's voice. But that's like the thing I want to mention. Like, yes, if you as a person find it difficult to talk towards AI, and let's be honest, Siri, we never got like a very good relationship with Siri on Apple. You need to across that bar, because otherwise also these kind of tools are not going to help, because you need to feel okay to have that interaction. I feel fine to have this interaction with AI.
You had one point there, building in this, in this area, and we're seeing real user feedback one way or the other, right? Kind of, and that informs me on like what I see is going well, what's not going well. Interesting learning on automations, and this is kind of a little bit, still maybe too early, but we're actually seeing that you need to strike the balance really well in, hey, this is just too much, and it becomes pages of stuff that I'm skipping over, and it's kind of slop. Like it's good quality, it's trustworthy, all of that stuff is correct, but it's just not relevant for you in that moment. And I think, especially for call coaching, I think that actually is, that can work, right? You basically kind of summarize all the calls in a day, and then you get, kind of the update. What we're also seeing a lot though is basically asking the same questions. And this is, yes, the person needs to change their workflow, and that's always difficult. I totally see that. But when people ask questions, whatever comes back could be the exact same output as an automation, but it's way more relevant. It's way more specific to their pain. They kind of get to ask follow-up questions, kind of go deeper into that. And we're actually seeing that, my whole point is not, promotative. My whole point is like, there is a balance between what you should automate and what should be ad hoc and very kind of situational specific, right? Kind of that's I think the insight I wanted to kind of get across.
I really think on this point, and then we can move on from like, let's say there's still like the top and middle funnel, but like, again, it's this context. Like if you need to coach me, you need to give the AI tooling, whatever, the context of, hey, Koen, this quarter, and we've talked about this, I think, 1.5 years ago in one of your earlier shows, like on coaching with AI. I mean, I built all those coaching frameworks, right? And I want to make sure, Koen, as a leader, needs to be coached on those 2-3 things this quarter. And let the AI only focus on those 2-3 things, because that's the thing. And that's also with AI, everything, and it's also not my strongest thing, is it gets overwhelming. It's got too much. And if it's too much and overwhelming, no impact.
It's useless.
So, and that's the same with AI. Where do we start? We need to really break it down and really break it down towards 1 or 2 things, and that's it. Be specific. And if you're not specific, it's overload, overwhelming, won't have any impact. I think that's also very important learning.
But I guess the coaching piece does carry over into the AI, the AE kind of realm, right? So what I'm seeing so far, no one is really seriously talking about replacing AEs. Nope. There's a little bit of talk in the SMB space, and I totally get that. It's, where someone is only a little bit better than a chatbot previously, I think in those cases, and kind of an AI AE can take over. But then also what I'm seeing, and I think you and Shantanu and I were kind of chuckling about this, what it feels like in the AE space, and similarly so for the AM space, is there are a bunch of mini use cases, but there's no banger use case. You know what I mean? It's like on the SDR side, you have the research piece and maybe the outreach automation. Like that seems like banger use cases. For the AEs, is a lot of small things. I would love to kind of hear, what you're seeing there before I jump in. But like, it seems to be lots of small things where people are a little bit lazy on moving on that, really.
The question is also, and I hear you saying this, right? Like, but why are we always looking for this big next thing? Is that needed to make impact? Again, getting back to simplification and specific use cases. I mean, I'm trying also to always break it down into phases of the journey. And if I talk about, let's say, the SDR, like outbound or discovery calls whatsoever, you always have to deal with a certain preparation, execution, and a follow-up. And it's the same for an AE. It's preparation, it's execution, it's follow-up. So first, preparation. AE,
I can help the AE with exactly the same piece of information. And you know, I also look at those databases which I've built, where I have the best tips and tricks on how to do a demo, how to convince a CFO, etc. If I have eventually the right context for the upcoming demo which I've scheduled, and I can provide you, Tony, as an AE, with all that information, so you feel more confident and you know what kind of questions you can ask the CEO, the CFO on that next call. Those tiny details maybe doesn't seem big, but I can tell you the impact you have on that one demo. And I may hope you have 3 demos a day, 15 a week, multiplied by 5 people in the team is 45. Should we calculate the impact of that use case by preparing you better, and so you are executing better? So there I see a potential. And then eventually, and what I like, I mean, I'm a big fan of digital sales rooms, for instance. I'm only working with my teams for digital sales rooms for 3 years. And also there you've seen this tooling, because we should not always look at AI or ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. You should also really embrace your current tech stack. Consolidation, yes, but your current tech stack, and see what are their use cases, which they are adding with AI. And for instance, our current vendor with digital sales rooms, they also really, they call it the CRO in the pocket. So continuously after you have done a conversation with your customer, it also helps you what kind of information you need to send towards which person, and it suggests those follow-ups. And then I think from a preparation perspective, so you can execute in your demo or or negotiation call, or eventually afterwards with your follow-up, whether this is an email or video or whatever. I think this is actually very, very impactful. However, we are looking towards the fanciness, but we should look at the practical implication and impact, if you ask me.
I think the reason why fanciness and big impact usually helps is kind of a turning the tide kind of moment, right? Kind of there's this saying, hey, you need to be 10x better than the previous solution for someone to move on and adopt you. You can't just be double as good. You need to be wildly better, right? And I think kind of what gets people moving is, you know, you and I talked a lot about optimization and incremental like improvements and all of that jazz. But there, you know, very few people get super excited about this. I think that's just simply also true. And I think while this might be wrong in general, I think that's just how humans behave, right? And I totally do agree. In terms of call prep, in terms of, you know, next steps, in terms of CRM updates, in terms of like pipeline analysis, you know, what is slipping, what is not slipping, what's looking well, where should I focus myself? Like all of these things, you know what? AI can actually help you with that extremely well, because there's a lot of data that needs to be crunched and consumed, right? But again, like we're looking at basically managing your context, managing your memory. The AI itself has, you know, is not trained on your CRM data, for example, right? So it's really trying to figure out, well, how can you give the AI the context to be really smart for you, right?
Yeah, but like, and that's the thing, and we need to understand as, again, leaders, and that's like I've done quite some workshops now as well on AI powered go to market, and if I talk to founders and leaders, I said like, we need to understand that we need to provide this towards our people. So the thing is, if we let the people do it, like the same thing, preparation, etc., follow up, let's be honest, it's not the quality we stand for as a company, as a brand, and therefore it impacts even, so it can even harm. But if we collectively understand where in the flow can we, I always say, give 30% back towards our SDR, AE, account manager, marketeer, whatever. And we really need to then make sure, and there again, towards your vibe coding skills, which I don't argue with, Tony, but like I think eventually you and me need to work together with the engineering team to really make sure that we, to your point, connect the CRM database, connect the call recording, connect the calendar, and really have that context and have the context. If Tony asks a question towards that specific AI use case, or Koen, we both in the same company have a different role. So also that element, and it sounds very weird, but that's like where I already started myself, I think more than 1.5 years ago with my AI engineer. So every time when I have a prompt, it's first ask, who are you? And for now, I just type my email address, because then it knows all the context for myself. Then in this case, we've connected calendar, we've connected CRM, we've connected call recordings. So it has all this information. And in this case also, and this is actually a nice use case, which we called like the daily prep agent, it actually goes towards the web. Latest information on the contacts who are joining that conversation, on the company, on the industry.
maybe even on the competitors, because if I add some value to you in the upcoming conversation, you trust me more. And then in this case, also it goes into this rich database of the latest tactics for providing a demo towards a CFO or whatsoever. And by having all this data connected for your context, for your upcoming meeting, and I know I'm talking to, I kid you not, but this makes a lot of impact, which all our people, whether you are the most experienced AE or AM or CSM, we don't have time for it, we don't like it, and please let the AI do this. So there, the AI is really a team member of your organization. And again, that sounds super boring as a use case, but super impactful because that compounds in the funnel.
I totally agree. And I think the other piece there is it simply also needs to be super easily accessible, right? I think what I've also seen, especially in this context, is yes, we're saying kind of, hey, it sounds super boring, but first of all, ask yourself, well, what's the prep my AEs are currently doing? Like ask yourself, my experience is they don't even read the SDR notes. Like, that's the level, right? So kind of what can you really do to make this easier and better and more impactful for them? And I think, those AI solutions certainly kind of help with that. But then on top of this, there are like 20 different use cases for AEs, I think, with AI. And I think what's sometimes overwhelming and difficult is like, well, should I now buy 20 different solutions in order to kind of have 20 different use cases be done? I think I'm just saying, kind of, I think this is what people are struggling with sometimes, right? Kind of, how do I get all of that stuff into kind of one connected piece?
Yeah.
But let's not kind of get stuck here, right?
No.
But ultimately, I think for the AE thing, the struggle that people are having and that we're seeing is like, on the one hand side, there's not the breakthrough massive use case. There are a couple of really good incremental ones, but you need to figure out how to, yes, make it context aware, connect it to your call recorder and your CRM and your product and your ticketing and what have you. But also, have this surface in all the different kind of places where it should, right? And I think that's still to be overcome with the AE side. Let's kind of move on to the CSM AM piece. And I think some of the same pieces I feel are also relevant here. Thinking about preparation, handover. I think especially CSMs and AMs, when they do onboarding calls or prep calls or whatever they do, there's a lot of context that's locked away in the sales funnel, that the sales guy, when you set them down to have the handover, is simply forgotten, right? Again, AI can help you summarize some of these pieces, pull them up, make them available to you, etc. Right? There are a couple of those items that are popping up, I think, for that role that are extremely similar to what we just discussed with the AEs.
And I think that comes maybe back towards the discussion we had before is on the boringness of those kind of AI use cases, but the handover. That's on itself, of course, a use case, which, let's be honest, the AE doesn't like to have all this information, again, stored in somewhere in your CRM or in a certain doc. Jump on a call internally to discuss the handover. Nobody likes it. The CSM actually also doesn't like it, or the implementation manager. Why not? It's not presented in their context because, I mean, it's a salesperson. They want to move on. Like, hey, no. But if we there have all, again, the CRM data, the call recordings, and all the information stored, and this handover is done by an AI agent, but here I think, again, the context for the implementation manager or the CSM to understand in their context for the customer. And I think, and that's like also where AI can do. You and me, we're both different. My information, now after a few times talking with myself, the way I communicate, I can't help myself communicate very different. But I also know that maybe there's some information lost in translation because the way I communicate to you and you receive it a different way. And I think that's also where AI can really, really, really help, because maybe the way you perceive that information is really significantly different than the way I pronounce this information. So getting back towards that handover, super impactful use case. If we can element as well of also know like to who and I'm talking eventually.
So I think you phrase it in a very positive and very good way to say like, well, the the way you communicate might be different from the way I communicate, and there will be something lost in translation, right? But also, what is also true is because you're the AE, you might emphasize some things that make you look better and maybe de-emphasize some things that make you look worse. But those things might still be in there, right? There might be things you mentioned that's important to the customer, but maybe you know that the
We
product
saw
isn't
that
super strong,
integration where we know actually it's still like
you
kind of big
know?
data, but it's
And
very important for them that we have this in the integration. So they sold on the
you
idea.
know it. But my point here is, screw all of this communication style thing, which I think is a euphemism to talk about. Well, wouldn't it be good to have some objectivity here, actually, right? Wouldn't it be good? And this goes, by the way, for pipeline reviews, forecasting too. Like, let's have a second opinion on what's actually going on here, and let's not say that's the leading opinion, but it's good to have another opinion, right? And the same thing also in the handover. There can be stuff that's maybe a little bit more objective, maybe that's good. And this is not solely an AE thing. I think that's also a CSM thing. I've had, multiple extremely talented CSMs that lost deals, or, had customers churn, and, they didn't flag it because, either they didn't necessarily want to say it, or they didn't hear the same things, or they forgot about this a little bit. And I'm not saying people are doing this on purpose, but there certainly is a bias in all of us. I think it's called self-preservation, to kind of bring up the more positive things that are connected to us than the other pieces. And having some AI, some objectivity on top, I don't think it's the end all be all, but it certainly is a use case.
No, and again, like I think especially on the AM CSM side, and I know, and I sometimes really feel for them because like they have a big book which they need to manage of customers.
Yeah.
I think, for instance, also within Personio, where we've been working on quite a bit, like the last, quite some time actually. Again, cross-functional is what we call this proactive churn prediction modeling, right? And I think, yes, we are all busy, but if AI can help you provide insights for the coming week, we are now like you start the week, and hey, I think these are the accounts where you really need to focus on because these according all the data. And that's an interesting thing. We talk about so much on the marketing and SDR side, but the further we come down in the funnel, the more qualitative data we have on the customer. So actually we can be way better. So also ourselves in Personio, for instance, we are spending way more time on right side bow tie, so existing business data, and see like where AI can help there because we have all this information, which we know is quality. And I think then I can help the CSM and AM to see like, hey, these according all the data is really where we need to put our emphasis. And actually, we also do it on the, because everyone talks on, especially for now, everyone goes now in planning for next year and, we need to do more, we need to grow. But I think there's so much hidden information on preventing churn to happen or expansion opportunities who are possible by me that also AI analyze good adoption and good impact and and bring that towards the equation.
So I think there was a really strong point out of many strong points, Koen. But one thing I just wanted to hook into was really let's kind of take a second here. This applies for AMs, CSMs, and AEs. Yes, we as leaders are sometimes a little bit like, they're lazy, they could work more and stuff. But also, if you flip this around, these AEs have a pretty big book of business. They have a lot of things that they're supposed to be totally on top of, like researching those accounts, building account plans, having a point of view when they're kind of being fully prepped, doing this whole medic thing, doing the follow-up, doing, all, and this times what, 100 or something like this, right? And then, what I just said, add on top of that for the CSM product usage, goals that they wanted to achieve but aren't or are, right? Kind of a rollout plan, onboarding plan, all of that stuff kind of happening on top. So if you really think about it, those people are, for better or worse, juggling a lot of different relevant pieces of data and trying to make sense of that. And I think that's asking a lot. I think it's asking a lot, right? And I think there are two AI solutions to this. One is around the summarization that we've talked about a lot already, kind of summarizing calls, summarizing usage data and so forth, and kind of trying to combine, summarizing all of those things together. But I think then the other piece, and maybe that's a derivative of this, is prioritizing, like figuring out who needs focus right now, who needs to be taken care of, right? And again, I think the trick here is genuine thought, genuine ideas, sifting out what's BS and what's not. I think those are unique capabilities of humans. Like, and I don't see that necessarily changing for a little bit. But then the ability to sift through a bunch of data really quickly, maybe guided by the person, by the way. I think that is trying to combine those two things in a really nice way. And I think this, when you look at AI and coding, it's taking your thought and writing some text, right? Kind of, I think that's pretty great. I think for the go-to-market side, it's way more to thinking about searching, summarizing, prioritizing, analyzing. Those are the kind of types of verbs I would use for jobs that AI should do in the go-to-market side versus the coding, writing text side.
Yeah. And I think you're actually nailed to the point of prioritization. And I think that is, if you also almost like, there is this overload of AI. Yes, we have all this information and I can send you so much information to prep for your next call. In the entire funnel, we need to make sure, and definitely for AMs and CSMs, is where to then prioritize what specifically for that specific customer at a specific moment, knowing that the renewal is coming up in 3 or 6 months. And to your point, which I actually really liked, is like our bias towards being overly positive and like hiding kind of like, well, we actually know we should put our focus on, but like, hey, it's going to be a different conversation again. I just put it aside. It will solve for itself. And if we want to become like this 1% more sustainable, 2% growing next year, the answer, compounding with our teams, and again, we can't blame any of our ICs. It comes from the leaders. We need to facilitate them with those tools so they can maximize their time with the customer on the right thing to create the right impact. And I think if you really will break it down, that's where I think the value lies. And the problem is everyone, also all those vendors, they're coming up with all the shiny tools. And what is the true impact you have been able to make for your customers? So that's more from the vendor side, right? They haven't much. That's why you're reading in the news, like 90% of the AI use case is trending. Why? We, as leaders, we also didn't quantify. And I think that comes down to myself, as we are both for lovers of the bow tie, but we need to understand the entire customer journey. Where does it really, where does shit hits the fan? Where do we need to kneel down and focus there when it comes to AI use cases? Fix there the fundamentals, fix there your data. And then to our point, I think, make sure that we have collecting all this data and know that we know the context, but please help us, whether you're a leader, even a founder or a sales leader, revenue leader, or whatever leader, or whether you're an SDR, an AM, or CSM on AE, help me prioritize. I think that gives you and me a lot of focus. And of course, then we need to still consistently execute. But I think there lies a big help in this madness of AI, which goes so fast, to really focus and give some time back to also rest and prepare for the next call, because we keep rushing in our jobs.
But I also think, maybe kind of let's wrap it here. Because I think what you also said there is something that more and more people are waking up to in general. This whole AI is going to replace us. Likely not going to happen for a while. But AI really great at augmenting us. Like all the things we suck at, which is like reading a lot of text, sifting through a lot of data, doing all of, trying to connect the dots, trying to see patterns in it. We are really terrible at that. AI can help us with that, especially on the go-to-market side, right? And I really see it, and I think this whole Copilot thing is a little bit overused, but basically having the ability to get those pieces of information kind of served up to you, that symbiosis I think can be extremely powerful.
100%.
Thank you so much. For everyone who wants to check out what the two of us are doing, also kind of GTMOS, how can we find that, Koen?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or just through LinkedIn or my Substack, Koen Stam, that's substack.com. I mean, I'm a fan of your Substack, but I'm trying just to educate all my learnings and give it back towards the audience. I'm still an amateur there on Substack, but I'm learning a lot. And this is also, again, like how I learn on a weekly basis on AI. Like, I'm not perfect, but we need to keep learning. And eventually the goal, to put this back into our teams. Like, they need to benefit from the right prioritization proactively, not reactively, because we're not good at these kind of things. It needs to be really not a co-pilot, but it needs to be proactively delivered in our email, Slack, Teams, wherever we are really working on a daily basis.
That's it. And obviously, kind of in my case, attive.ai. Koen, thanks a bunch. And I don't know, maybe see you next time. Cool. Let's see.
Who knows?
Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers.